All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to the Nobody Studios Inside Culture live stream. My name is Sejal Thakkar and I'm the Chief Culture Officer at Nobody Studios. And look, I've had some incredible nobodies on this show before today, but this is one you definitely do not want to miss. We have a true trailblazer joining us today, Martin Stark, and he's going to be sharing all kinds of insights from his own lived experiences. He's going to be giving us some practical, actionable steps that all of you can take to start cultivating courage, both in our personal, and your professional lives. And our guest today, Martin Stark, he's going to tell us a little bit about himself, but he's super passionate about just empowering individuals, empowering teams, empowering organizations on how to cultivate courage and really move towards and prioritize meaningful inclusion. So welcome to the show, Martin.
Good morning, good evening, good night, everybody. Thanks for welcoming me. I'm Martin Stark. My pronouns are he, him. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I currently am, the Gamaraga people. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and First Nations people.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I love it when we get that acknowledgement. Martin, I've been following you on LinkedIn for several years now, and it's been so inspiring and amazing to just see your career sort of unfold and just, I like to say, seeing you blossom on LinkedIn and everything you've achieved in your career. But for those of us that are joining us from all over, we've got people here from Ohio so far, Maryland, people from all over the globe. Tell us a little bit more about your background, and maybe you could share a key turning point that has gotten you to where you are today.
So I spent 20 years in the corporate world, managing technology procurement, negotiating outsourcing contracts, all the software and services that people have used in their daily lives. At one stage, I probably bought it for the companies I worked in. My life kind of took a turn in 2006. I had gallstones blocking my liver, and I had a procedure called an ERCP. And what happened is dye seeped into my pancreas, and I developed severe acute pancreatitis, had a collapsed lung, went into septic shock, and I was placed in 2 induced comas. And prior to my second coma, I ended up having a tracheotomy, which is here. This is my voice when I speak through my throat. So there's my tracheotomy scar. So that experience just caused an incredible amount of PTSD, but also incredible courage. When you go in a coma, am I going to wake up? A few months later, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease. Over the last 17 years, I've been in hospital over 70 times, had 4 major surgeries, and had a successful career. I didn't realize how courageous I was being until a performance review which said, Martin, please be more courageous. And I switched that on, and that turned life around. Mm-hmm. 4 years ago, I took a sabbatical, didn't know what I wanted to do, started posting on LinkedIn, all over the place on LinkedIn when we first start. But that's how I met people like yourself and Mark and Ray, Leonard Jr. And from that, I started becoming more of an advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, speaking about courage and inclusion. At the end of 2017, I almost died from Addison's disease. Mm-hmm. And that experience regurgitated the PTSD. And to overcome that, I had a few self-defense classes. And one of those classes was boxing. And then I started boxing training, and that transformed my life. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I was a gay guy who was always the last one to be picked at school sports for soccer, would never contemplate doing anything like boxing, but have the words courage and fear nothing tattooed on my back, and boxing has changed my life.
I mean, first of all, the topic that we're going to talk about is courage, and just sharing your background and just everything that you've gone through, the obstacles that have been thrown your way, most of which have been, by the way, outside of your control. And for you to be able to, to sit here now and to share this wisdom from having gone through it, that takes a lot of courage in and of itself, right? So thank you for being vulnerable. And I can tell you just, since I read your story and I've been following you, I'm a cheerleader, as you know. I'm always looking for ways to like, how can we get Martin's voice heard? Because I think it's important for people to know that we can share our stories with other people, right? And I think the more that we do it, right, we realize that we're not all alone. Like everybody's challenges are different, everybody's struggles are different. But you and I were talking about this before we went live, that there's a lot of pain, and that pain, when you're in those situations, you feel like you're all alone. Right. And speaking of that, look at there. We got Mark McNally sighting.
Hey,
He put
Mark.
something in, and he said, crazy fan of these two amazing folks, Martin and Sejal. So did you want to say anything else? I think I might have cut you off right there.
Well, I was going to say storytelling is the most impactful form of human communication. It's steeped in history. And I use the analogy of a family recipe. You might go to your local baker, and that baker's been around for 150 years, and recipes go down from generation to generation. But we find a way of communicating. And we think of all the pain that goes into maybe baking a cake or making something, but the love that is shared by breaking bread together, sharing a meal. So storytelling is how we learn. And I think it just brings people and communities together.
I love it. I love it. And I'm a huge believer in that concept. And when I heard that you were joining Nobody Studios, I was like, yes, because I know your story, and I know that because of what you've gone through, I know what you're going to bring to the studio. And so one of the questions I love asking everybody, Martin, on the show is, what drew you to the Nobody Studios journey? And so tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to join Nobody Studios.
Well, the first thing were the people. You were involved, and Junior were involved, people who I admire and respect deeply were involved. Then I looked at the vision, creating 100 companies in 5 years and being able to influence positive change from the outset. All the things we talk about in inclusion and diversity is changing things that already exist, things that shouldn't be there, systemic racism, homophobia, etc. But influencing that change from the outset and bringing your own seat to the table. Such a powerful statement of equity. And I see equity as fairness, just creating that level playing field and just being able to access opportunities, be part of something, irrespective whether you have $100 or $100 billion, everybody can be part of this journey. So it just aligned with my core values, and it just, with the people, it was a no-brainer.
Well, yes. Well, I'm so glad. And I just want to say on behalf of the studio, thank you so much. I mean, we just finished our equity crowdfunding campaign, and the way that you supported us, and people just sort of stepped up in ways that I don't think any of us even anticipated, that sort of support. I mean, we ended up with over 900 new nobodies across the globe. And so, I just want to thank you personally as well. Your videos that you made, what you were doing for us and getting us awareness on LinkedIn. We really appreciate that. We're super grateful for everybody, including people like you who have really supported us and gotten us to this point. And here you go. You have Ray Leonard Jr.
There's Ray,
who's joining in. And he's like, my guy, Martin, he is amazing. Absolutely. So are you, Ray. Ray Leonard's incredible.
So you, Ray.
He's one of the most humble leaders I've ever had an opportunity to work with. Ray is incredible.
Strong, visible ally to the LGBTQ plus community. Shared so much wisdom with me with the boxing championships. Epitome of what a visible ally does. So big shout out for you, Ray.
Yay, we go, Ray. And so let's get into the content. Look, it's almost 10 minutes, and I could just talk to you for like hours. I knew this was going to happen. But I know that both of us agree that culture is the glue of every organization. And we both agree that it's something that we have to be intentional about. We have to cultivate it. It has to be something that we nurture so that we get the desired outcomes that we want. And so, you've had a lot of interaction with several different leaders at the studio. And you've interacted with, during the equity crowdfunding, even before that, you've also interacted with Ovations and their team.
Yeah.
So what is it? Share with the people that are joining in. What is it, in your opinion, that makes Nobody Studios unique as far as from a cultural perspective?
What I've just seen is a strong level of trust and transparency. So during the equity crowdfunding campaign, I attended 3 sessions and I just saw the strategy just being explained in simple terms. Being able to ask those challenging questions without fear, but from those challenging conversations, had a very deep and engaging discussion. Being able to have an input into something, saying this is what I believe. So as part of the video campaign, there was the influencer playbook, and my came through, this is what I actually think should be done. And had a great couple of conversations, and through that I was able to bring my whole self to the journey. So I felt included from the outset, and all the behaviors that I've seen from the leaders to everybody involved is, when people talk about companies, when I see a huge smile on their face when they're talking about a company, that for me is pure gold. And that's what I've seen throughout this journey.
Yes, thank you. And I am with you. That's one of the reasons why I joined when Mark and I were first talking, Mark McNally, our chief nobody, when we were first talking, I was drawn to the journey because after meeting with several members of the leadership team, everybody was really here because they truly believe in our mission. And, one of the things we're always...
The sun's coming up, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Mine will be coming up here pretty soon too. I see it. It's already starting to happen. But Martin, I really wanted to pick your brain because one of the things that we're always striving to do at the studio is to create an environment where the best ideas come to the top, right? So it's not about the highest paid person in the room. It's about making sure we create that environment where people can bring their ideas and feel safe. So what are some, and then you posted a video on LinkedIn, I think it was just a few days ago, about how you said the best idea can often come from the quietest person in the room. Yeah. And so give us some advice on what is it that leaders at Nobody Studios can do, at other organizations, especially like ours that are virtual, that have people all over the globe. What are things that people can do to make sure they create that safe environment so that people can voice their ideas and opinions without fearing like they're going to be punished or something like that?
So the first thing is to look out for signs of fear. And I wrote an article about this a few weeks ago. In teams, if you're seeing avoidance, if you're seeing blame culture, poor communication, low morale, there might be a level of fear in the team, and you need to address that. The second is understanding how people communicate. Not everybody is an extrovert. Not everybody wants to say something in a meeting. They may ruminate on that and 3 days later have a thought. Or a person may be listening for the entire meeting and say one thing, but they've been thinking deeply for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Also, different types of communication. Not everybody is verbal. They might want to use Slack, their internal social media feed. So just finding different ways, providing time and access to you, mentoring, and just provide access to resources. Those are the best ways, because often there might be a project. Somebody might not have had Microsoft projects. They use an Excel spreadsheet, but a project manager comes in and they're suddenly using Microsoft projects, and the difference that it made just being having access to those resources and tools. That just levels the playing field. It's equity in the communication.
Oh my God, you said so many things. There are so many valuable insights that you just gave to our listeners. And I want to just break those down again real quickly for people, because you said some really important things. I think you mentioned the word listening, several times, right? Like making sure, not that we're just listening, but that we're actively listening to each other. You talk about transparency and being honest. You talk about seeking feedback from other people, asking people for what works for them, right?
Everybody's this way, sorry, because of the sun.
The sun is going to follow you wherever you go.
Yeah, it is.
You talk about, asking people for what works for them, because everybody's different.
Yeah.
And some people may not feel comfortable voicing their opinions, maybe publicly. They may want to do it privately, right? So seeking feedback and then incorporating that is huge. And you also talked about something about, having difficult conversations. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that could be really uncomfortable for some people to do, but I think it's essential to building trust, right, in an organization.
So remember, we're all different human beings. We all react in different ways. If your manager would send you a meeting invite, they wanted to speak with you at 3 o'clock, most people would think, what have I done wrong? But if you knew your manager well, you'd probably think that's going to be fine. But understanding different ways of communication, yourself being open and vulnerable. When you're open and vulnerable, you start to build trust. Being curious, just asking more open questions. Paint me a picture. Tell me why this project could be successful when you were involved, or tell me the problems or challenges that this project has had that nobody expected. Those more open questions enable a discussion rather than tell me why you didn't perform or tell me why the team didn't perform. It's actually invoking fear. The next step is listening to those lived experiences. How many times we've shared things and somebody has said, no, that's not, I don't believe that's the case. So what was the point of that conversation? It's also welcoming different viewpoints. Mm-hmm. We all have different perspectives. It's bringing that seat to the table. It's the values of Nobody Studios, what we've been talking about earlier, the transparency and the integrity. In a commercial negotiation, there's a strategy called a liars meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is to actually get people in the room talking about things, that you enable people to talk about some key issues with no blaming, but between the communication, you find common ground. So you find the truth. But unless you have that communication, unless you have that open style where people can share things, then it's unlikely to derive a great outcome.
Yes, absolutely. You're speaking my language, Martin. Seriously, you know that you are. You talk a lot about courageous mindset. It's
Yes.
like sort of, I don't know if you have a tattoo of that yet or not, but you kind of need to get the word courageous, because you talk about courageous mindset, and you and I both agree that in order to change or challenge status quo, you have to have courage, right? So I'm curious, how do you define that word courage? What does that mean to you?
Taking ownership of fear, venturing forward with confidence and resilience. Fear is a major source of information. You think, thought, emotion, act. Our thoughts drive our emotions. Your body might be trembling. Your heart is still beating. The heart might be racing, but it's still beating because it's reacting to your emotions and how you feel. But it's the act, what you do next. Why do you fear something? And that's where I talk about stepping into courage. Times you've been courageous in the past. Other people have been courageous to enjoy the rights we have today. People marched in the first Mardi Gras in Sydney in 1978. 2 months ago, Sydney hosted World Pride. The Stonewall riots. It wasn't just one night. It was a group of people, trans people of colour, there standing up for human rights. If they didn't do that, it would have been a much harder journey. So other people have been courageous. Look for your role models, look for the heroes, and try and think times you've been courageous. And it's such a different perspective with the challenge ahead, because you've owned the fear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it involves people that took that risk, right, to step out of their comfort zone, and the people that stood up for what they believe in, even if it's difficult or it's unpopular. And Nobody Studios really is about challenging status quo. We're looking at ways to do things differently, but also to sort of pave the way for the future generations, right? And how can we make an impact, just like the examples that you're giving. And so you already started doing this, but what are some ways that we can, especially in the workplace, let's say if we focus in the workplace, what are some ways that people can challenge status quo with courage at work, right? Because this is where it's a fine line, right? Because we want people to challenge it, but we want them to do it in the right way so that it's productive, right? We don't want people to create conflict, but we know that a certain amount of conflict is healthy and can help us innovate. So what are some tips that we can approach work challenges with courage?
Start with a bit of education for yourself. Understand what it might be a project. Understand the project goals, the vision, the mission. Find ways where you could add value. Also start having conversations with people in the team. So that way it's not just going into a meeting and there's conflict. Being courageous in how you communicate is not, oh, you should be doing it this way. It could be a reasoned voice, using those open questions. How are we going to get there when we have these challenges? It engages debate. It's a respectful conversation. I've also seen, you think about whistleblowers and the person who has to speak up because something's going wrong. But imagine if that person had been asking questions. Okay, well, why does it work this way? I've seen problems in other organizations. Is it going to manifest here? So if you're always curious, you have great relationships with leaders, and the leaders are the ones who set the culture. The leaders are the ones who set the parameters for people to engage. So if that isn't there, on your one-on-ones and the corridor conversations, just say, hey, can you help me? Can you do this? It's got to be an ongoing conversation. Otherwise, fear, so poor behaviors, blame culture, lack of accountability, poor communication. If you're manifesting those behaviors, that's going to manifest within the meeting. If you exhibit courageous behaviors, people are going to have more confidence in you, and that's going to inspire confidence in those around you. Let's move this back again. Sorry about this.
Did I ever imagine in my career to be sitting here on a show sponsored by an organization talking about how we can approach these challenges with courage, about nobody shooting the kind of culture we're looking right by example, which is something that you said is studios to level. We know that this is going to be. I see Christine Passer is here. She said, "This
I'm
is
having a technology moment." Yeah, sorry about this.
I told you it's going to follow you wherever you go. Don't even worry about it. Just be comfortable. It's going to follow you everywhere in your room. Okay, so and then Scott Mason's in the house, and Scott just said, "This exchange about fear has been really hard-hitting. Thank you both for a spear throw to the heart of the exchange." Wow. Thank you, Scott, for joining us here today. And then one question came in, Martin. I'll ask you this question and then we'll wrap it up. But what is it you're not feeling psychologically safe? Here, I'll just put this question so you can see it. Enough to challenge the status quo at work. So when is it, I guess what you're asking is, when are those situations where people are not feeling psychologically safe? So Martin, can you, if you're still here, you might have just dropped out. I think we just lost Martin there. So Joyle, what I'm seeing your question is that, a lot of times these environments are created because they've happened for a long period of time and nobody has addressed the culture. Right. And as Martin and I talked about at the very beginning, culture is really the glue of the organization. And it's something that, needs to be cultivated and so that it can thrive. Right. And everybody that touches the organization indirectly or directly impacts your culture. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm happy to connect with you afterwards and talk a little bit more about that. So everybody, I'm sorry that we lost Martin there, but he added so much value to the show here today. I want to thank you all for joining. And look, we are always looking for people to join our journey. We know that to build 100 new companies in the next 5 years, we're going to need a lot of talented people. So if what you heard about today was something that resonated with you and you want to learn more about what we're doing, go check us out at nobodystudios.com. And then, we're always looking for people. Oh, wait, we have Martin back right here. I'll add him back onto the stream.
Sorry about that. There's an electrician that just turned out the power for the building.
No problem. We were just going to wrap it up. But do you want to address this question that somebody had for you before we wrap it up? Joyle Crawford, and welcome back, Martin. She was asking this question: is that, what is it when you're not feeling psychologically safe enough to challenge the status quo at work? And I think what she's asking is, what can you do in those situations when you're not feeling psychologically safe? What can people do in those situations? Do you have anything you want to add to that question?
The first thing is address how you feel yourself, being psychologically safe. If it's a toxic culture, personally, I would look at an exit strategy. If you're going in stress, worried, I'll give an example. I led an organisation. I raised an issue about my health and having Addison's disease. I was told the next day actually in that same meeting, I needed to decide if it was the right organisation for me. After saying I'd almost died from a condition, I knew it was going to be too toxic, and I left. The other thing is build some allies. Have people around you who can support you, who you trust. Maybe find a mentor who can, if it's to deal with confidence and developing the skills. But if you're not feeling psychologically safe, this really impacts your health and well-being, and just make sure you're okay first. And if it's not right, I would encourage you to leave. I know that's not the best thing to be saying, but if they're not worth your time.
It's true. People first means taking care of yourself first, right? And we all know that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else as well. So, Martin, I'm going to close it out, but is there anything that you can share? Maybe you can, if everybody out here was wondering how they can join Nobody Studios or why they should join Nobody Studios, is there anything that you want to say on that question before we wrap it up?
Many people I've worked with have always wanted to be involved in something from the outset, or a project that may not have had access to something. This is an opportunity to be involved in greatness. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I was excited, because the 100 companies are solving some of the biggest challenges we have in society and creating innovation to solve problems for people. I can't think of a better purpose than that.
Incredible. Thank you so much for joining me. So you heard it from Martin Stark, an incredible trailblazer. We want you to bring your talent, your influence, your capital to help us build these companies. We value your contributions. Thank you again for everybody that has supported us, Martin. Thank you for being here today. And I know that together with you and people like you on our team, and Scott Mason's in the house.
Yeah, Scott.
We're all going to create something so much more meaningful and more substantial and significant than any of us can ever do alone, right? So Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Inside Culture live stream at Nobody Studios. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Bye, Scott Mason. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everyone.